Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. You're working late again? You've been coming home so late recently. Mark's voice was low and weary, his brow furrowed, his gaze fixed on his wife, Lisa. The fire in the fireplace crackled and danced, casting flickering shadows on the wall that mirrored the complex emotions on his face: doubt, fatigue, and a hint of barely perceptible anxiety. Lisa had just stepped through the door, the chill of the night still clinging to her. She was carrying an elegant leather bag, a birthday gift from Mark last year. She sighed, avoiding Mark's probing gaze, and placed the bag on the entryway table, saying casually, "The project is on a tight deadline. The exhibition requires late nights. I can't help it." Her voice held a note of fatigue, but also a subtle evasiveness. Mark felt a twinge in his heart, as if something had gently pricked him. He was a man of keen intuition, and from Lisa's tone and demeanor, he sensed something unusual. This wasn't the first time Lisa had come home so late. Over the past few months, her overtime hours had become increasingly frequent, and she arrived home later and later. Each time she explained, her eyes seemed to dart away, and her tone was somewhat perfunctory. An inexplicable unease welled up inside Mark, like a heavy stone pressing on his chest. "But it's already the third time this week. You never used to be like this." Mark's voice carried a hint of doubt and also a trace of grievance. In their 10 years of marriage, they had always been the model couple in their friends' eyes, deeply in love. Lisa was a talented curator, and Mark was a successful architect. They also had an 8-year-old daughter, Emily, who was intelligent and adorable. To outsiders, their life seemed like a perfect picture, happy and fulfilling. Lisa seemed a bit impatient. She walked over to the sofa and sat down, rubbing her temples. "What can I do? This project is very important to me. I can't just give up halfway." She paused, then added, "Besides, I'm doing this for our future, to give Emily a better life." Mark looked at Lisa's weary appearance and felt a pang of sympathy, but the doubts in his heart did not dissipate. He walked over and sat beside her, gently taking her hand, trying to read something from her eyes. Lisa's hand was a bit cold, and she subconsciously wanted to pull it back, but ultimately did not. "Lisa, is there something you're hiding from me?" Mark's voice was soft, but it carried a hint of firmness. Lisa's body stiffened slightly. She raised her head and looked into Mark's eyes. There was a flicker of panic in her eyes, but she quickly masked it. "No, what could I be hiding from you?" She chuckled, attempting to lighten the atmosphere. "You're overthinking, Mark." Mark didn't speak. He just looked at her quietly. His gaze was like two searchlights, trying to penetrate Lisa's disguise and see the truth deep within her heart. Lisa felt a little uncomfortable under his gaze. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark night. "I'm really fine, Mark." Her voice drifted from the window, somewhat ethereal. "I'm just very tired." Mark took a deep breath. He knew that further questioning would yield no results. He stood up, walked behind Lisa, and gently embraced her. "All right, I believe you," he said softly. "Get some rest." Lisa turned around and nestled into Mark's embrace. She could feel Mark's warmth and his steady heartbeat. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if to exhale all her unease and anxiety. However, Mark's doubts did not vanish with this hug. Instead, they took root in his heart like a seed. He began to pay attention to Lisa's every move, trying to find any clues. He noticed that Lisa's phone never left her hand. Even when she was taking a shower, she would take it into the bathroom. When she answered calls, she would always go to the balcony or the bedroom. Her voice hushed, as if she were afraid of being overheard. Moreover, she became increasingly indifferent to family gatherings, always making excuses. Previously, every weekend, they would take Emily to the park for a picnic or to a museum. But now, these family activities had become less and less frequent. And what worried Mark the most was that Lisa had, over time, arrangements 2 or 3 times a week, and always came home very late. One night, Mark woke up from a dream, thirsty. He got up to get a glass of water in the kitchen. As he passed the living room, he vaguely heard Lisa on the phone. Her voice was soft, but her tone was very intimate, as if she were talking to a lover. Mark's heart rate suddenly increased. He held his breath and quietly approached the living room. He's just so wonderful. I've never felt so understood. Lisa's voice came from the phone, with a hint of sweetness and intoxication. Mark's heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. He felt a suffocating pain. He couldn't believe his ears. He wished this was all a nightmare, but Lisa's voice clearly told him it was reality. Mark quietly retreated to the bedroom. He lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. He recalled Lisa's recent changes, her evasive eyes and perfunctory tone. He suddenly understood everything. Lisa's overtime was not really overtime, but time spent with another person, someone who made her feel understood and cherished. The next morning, Mark made an excuse about needing to get to the construction site early and left the house ahead of schedule. But he didn't go to the site. Instead, he drove to the vicinity of Lisa's company. He parked his car in a hidden corner and waited quietly. He wanted to know if Lisa was really working overtime, or if she was meeting the man who had captured her heart. The waiting process was long and agonizing. Mark's heart was filled with anxiety and unease. He repeatedly recalled the past with Lisa, the moments of their acquaintance, their falling in love, and their marriage. He couldn't understand why they had come to this point. Was it really because he had neglected her? Mark began to reflect on his role in the marriage. He admitted that he might have been too focused on work and neglected to accompany and care for Lisa. But could this be a reason for Lisa's betrayal? Mark's heart was filled with contradictions and struggles. His faint fear of betrayal was like an invisible dark hand, tightly gripping his throat. Just as Mark was lost in thought, he saw Lisa walking out of the company building. She was wearing an elegant dress and delicate makeup, looking radiant. She was holding a folder, as if she was going to meet an important client. Mark's heart raced. He started the car and quietly followed Lisa. He saw Lisa get into a taxi, which then headed towards the city center. Mark's heart grew increasingly uneasy. He didn't know where Lisa was going, nor did he know who she was going to meet. The taxi stopped in front of a luxurious hotel. Lisa got out and walked straight into the hotel. Mark's heart sank to the bottom. He knew that this hotel was known for its privacy and luxurious suites, a preferred choice for many couples. Mark parked the car in the parking lot across from the hotel. He sat in the car, watching the hotel entrance, his heart filled with pain and anger. He didn't know what to do, whether to rush in and confront Lisa or to leave silently. Just then, Mark's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He hesitated for a moment and then answered the call. "Mr. Mark, I'm the financial advisor for your family account," a strange voice said from the phone. "I've noticed some unusual expenditures on your account recently, and I wanted to confirm them with you." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He forced himself to remain calm and asked, "What unusual expenditures?" "In recent weeks, your account has had multiple transactions at places like the Rose Garden Hotel and Starlight Restaurant, and the amounts are not small," the financial advisor said. "These expenses were all made using your wife's credit card." Mark felt a wave of dizziness. He finally understood. Lisa's overtime was all lies. She was using their shared finances to enjoy a luxurious life with another man, while he was being kept in the dark like a fool. After hanging up the phone, Mark felt a deep sense of powerlessness. He looked at the hotel entrance, his heart filled with despair. He didn't know what to do or how to face all of this. A few days later, Mark found an excuse, saying he needed to go on a business trip for a few days. Lisa didn't suspect anything. She just told him to be safe. After leaving home, Mark didn't go to the airport. Instead, he went to a private detective agency. He needed more evidence. He needed to know all the details of Lisa's betrayal. Mark was restless in the detective agency. He told the detective about his situation and provided Lisa's photo and some basic information. The detective was an experienced middle-aged man. He listened carefully to Mark's story, occasionally nodding. "Mr. Mark, I will do my best to help you," the detective said, "but I need you to cooperate with me and provide more information and clues." Mark nodded. He gave the detective Lisa's phone number, license plate number, and the places she frequented. He also gave the detective the spending records provided by the financial advisor. "I will give you a result as soon as possible," the detective said. "Please keep your phone on." Mark left the detective agency, his mood heavy and complicated. He didn't know if what he was doing was right or wrong. But he knew he had to find the truth. He had to know how much Lisa had betrayed him. Back home, Mark acted as usual with Lisa, but his heart was filled with pain and struggle. He tried to find clues from Lisa's words and actions, but he found that Lisa was becoming more and more cautious. Her phone never left her hand, and she had set a password. One night, while Lisa was taking a shower, Mark secretly checked her phone. He knew Lisa's password. It was their wedding anniversary. He opened the phone and found many unfamiliar text messages and call records. He opened a text message that read, "Honey, I miss you so much. See you tonight at the usual place." Mark's hands trembled. He felt nauseous. He couldn't believe that this was the wife he loved, the mother of his child. He felt his world was collapsing. He didn't know how to face all of this. A few days later, Mark tentatively asked Lisa about her recent work arrangements, wanting to know if she was still continuing her overtime. "Lisa, how much longer will this project take?" Mark tried to keep his tone calm. Lisa was putting on makeup. She looked at herself in the mirror and answered casually, "It's almost done, just a few more weeks." "So, will you still be coming home this late during this time?" Mark continued to ask. Lisa's movements paused for a moment. She turned around and looked at Mark. A flicker of panic flashed in her eyes. I don't know. It depends on the progress of the project." Her voice trembled a little, and she spoke incoherently. Mark looked into Lisa's eyes. He knew she was lying. He felt a deep sense of disappointment and anger, but he still forced himself not to explode. "All right," Mark said, "then take care of yourself. Don't get too tired." Lisa nodded and didn't say anything more. She continued to put on her makeup, but her hands were trembling slightly. Mark looked at her back, his heart filled with pain and struggle. He didn't know how to face all of this or how to save their marriage. He felt that there was an invisible gap between him and Lisa. They were drifting further and further apart, and their hearts were growing further and further apart. These increasingly tense conversations and the widening rift made Mark even more determined to find the truth. He began to realize that he could never know the full truth or make Lisa confess just by his own observations and speculation. He needed more conclusive evidence, a more direct confrontation, to uncover all the lies beneath the facade of this happy family. These increasingly tense conversations and the growing rift not only made Mark more determined to find the truth, but also set the stage for his subsequent actions. He knew he couldn't passively wait any longer. He had to take action to uncover the truth, protect himself and his daughter, and at the same time, prepare for the possible revenge. This marital crisis was no longer just a problem between two people. It was like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode at any time, destroying everything they once had. These increasingly tense conversations and the widening rift made Mark even more determined to find the truth. He began to realize that he could never know the full truth or make Lisa confess just by his own observations and speculation. He needed more conclusive evidence, a more direct confrontation, to uncover all the lies beneath the facade of this happy family. These increasingly tense conversations and the growing rift not only made Mark more determined to find the truth, but also set the stage for his subsequent actions. He knew he couldn't passively wait any longer. He had to take action to uncover the truth, protect himself and his daughter, and at the same time, prepare for the possible revenge. This marital crisis was no longer just a problem between two people. It was like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode at any time, destroying everything they once had. The detective, a man named Mr. Peterson, contacted Mark a week later. The evidence he had gathered was damning. Photos of Lisa and a man, clearly intimate, entering and leaving the Rose Garden Hotel on multiple occasions, their body language speaking volumes. Restaurant bills, confirming the financial advisor's report, detailing lavish dinners for two. And perhaps most damning of all, a series of text messages intercepted from Lisa's phone, filled with endearments, explicit plans, and professions of a love that had no place in a marriage. The man in the photos and messages was identified as Daniel, Lisa's superior at the art gallery. Mr. Peterson presented the evidence to Mark in his dimly lit office, the only sound the hum of the city outside. Each photo, each text message, was a blow to Mark's gut, confirming his worst fears. He felt a cold rage building inside him, replacing the initial shock and disbelief. His hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. He stared at the photos, the faces of Lisa and Daniel, now twisted into something grotesque and unfamiliar. "They've been careful, but not careful enough," Mr. Peterson commented, his voice neutral, professional. "They always use the same hotel, the same restaurants. They have a routine." The detective outlined his methods: discreet surveillance, following Lisa after she left work, noting the times and dates of their meetings. He explained how he had obtained the phone records, emphasizing the legality of his methods. He had even managed to corroborate certain dates with the hotel's guest registry, always under assumed names. But the patterns were undeniable. He had avoided any illegal hacking, focusing on legally and ethically obtainable information. It was clear they felt safe, emboldened by their perceived secrecy, perhaps even underestimating Mark's resolve. Mark absorbed the information, his mind racing. He thanked Mr. Peterson, paid for his services, and left the office, the envelope containing the evidence heavy in his hand. He drove home in a daze, the images from the photos flashing before his eyes. He parked the car in the driveway and sat there for a long time, staring at the house, the symbol of his once happy family, now tainted by betrayal. The confrontation was inevitable. Mark chose a Saturday evening, knowing that Emily was spending the night at her friend's house. He laid the photos and printouts of the text messages on the dining table, the evidence stark and undeniable under the warm glow of the dining room light. He then poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid mirroring the turmoil in his heart, and waited. Lisa came home around 8 p.m., humming a cheerful tune, oblivious to the storm that awaited her. She walked into the dining room and stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the photos on the table. Her face turned pale, her eyes wide with shock and fear. What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Mark looked at her, his eyes cold and hard. "You tell me, Lisa, what is this?" His voice was dangerously calm, the calm before a storm. Lisa approached the table, her trembling hands reaching out to touch the photos. She picked one up, her eyes scanning the image, then dropped it as if it were burning her hand. She looked at Mark, her eyes pleading. "Mark, I can explain," she began, but her voice faltered. "Explain what?" Mark's voice was sharp, cutting through her feeble attempts at denial. "Explain how you've been sleeping with your boss? Explain how you've been lying to me for months? Explain how you've betrayed our marriage, our family?" Lisa started to cry, tears streaming down her face. "It's not what it looks like," she sobbed. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Mark laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, I'm sure it is. Complicated by lies, deceit, and betrayal." The argument escalated quickly, years of unspoken resentments and frustrations pouring out in a torrent of angry words. Lisa, her initial shock giving way to a desperate attempt at self-preservation, tried to justify her actions. "He made me feel alive, Mark. He made me feel appreciated, valued," she cried, her voice rising in pitch. "You were always so busy with work, you barely noticed me anymore. Daniel? He listened to me. He understood me." Mark felt a surge of anger, mixed with a profound sense of disgust. "So, my dedication to providing for our family, for Emily's future, that justifies your infidelity? That makes it okay to throw away 10 years of marriage, to shatter our daughter's world?" He slammed his fist on the table, the force of the blow making the glasses and photos jump. "What we had, what we built together, was that nothing to you?" Lisa flinched, her tears flowing even harder now. "No, of course not. I love you, Mark, I do. But I was lost, I was confused." She reached out to him, but he recoiled as if her touch was poison. "Don't touch me," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Don't you dare touch me." He picked up the printouts of the text messages and threw them at her. "Read them, Lisa. Read what you wrote to him. Tell me again how much you love me." Lisa recoiled, the papers fluttering around her like fallen leaves. She didn't need to read them. She knew what they contained. Words of love, of longing, of a future that didn't include Mark. The confrontation went on for hours, the raw emotions of betrayal, anger, and hurt laid bare. Mark remained resolute, his heart hardened by the evidence of Lisa's infidelity. He refused to accept her pleas for forgiveness, her promises to end the affair. The trust was shattered, the foundation of their marriage irrevocably broken. During this emotional turmoil, a new element entered the fray. Mark started receiving calls and emails from Daniel. At first, they were conciliatory, Daniel claiming the affair was a mistake, that he wanted to apologize and make amends. But when Mark remained unmoved, the tone shifted dramatically. "You're making a big mistake, Mark," Daniel said in one of the calls, his voice now laced with a thinly veiled threat. "Lisa and I are in love. You can't change that. And if you try to make trouble, it won't just hurt her, it'll hurt you too. I have connections, influence. I can make things very difficult for you, professionally and personally." Mark listened calmly, recording the call on his phone, adding it to his growing arsenal of evidence. "Are you threatening me, Daniel?" "I'm just stating facts," Daniel replied, his arrogance palpable. "Think about your career, your reputation. Think about what a messy divorce would do to Emily. It's in everyone's best interest to keep this quiet." These threats only solidified Mark's resolve. He realized he was not just dealing with a broken marriage, but also with a man who believed he was above the consequences of his actions. The realization that Daniel felt he could use his position and influence to intimidate him fueled Mark's anger and strengthened his determination. This was no longer just about his pain and Lisa's betrayal. It was about justice, about holding Daniel accountable for his actions. The initial confrontation and Daniel's subsequent threats marked a turning point. Mark realized that simply confronting Lisa and ending the marriage was not enough. The pain of betrayal was too deep, the damage too extensive. He needed to do more than just walk away. He needed to protect himself and Emily, and he needed Daniel to face the consequences of his actions. Mark started planning, his mind sharp and focused. He consulted with a lawyer, a sharp, experienced woman named Ms. Evans, to discuss his options for divorce and custody of Emily. He meticulously organized all the evidence, the photos, the text messages, the recordings of Daniel's calls, creating a comprehensive file that documented the affair and the subsequent threats. He knew he held a powerful hand, but he also knew that he needed to play it strategically. He couldn't simply react out of anger. He needed a plan, a calculated approach that would ensure the best outcome for himself and Emily while delivering the maximum impact to Lisa and Daniel. The seeds of revenge, sown in the soil of betrayal and watered by anger, began to sprout, growing into a carefully crafted plan that would soon blossom into a devastating reality for those who had wronged him. He would use the very tools they wielded against them: their arrogance, their secrets, and their belief that they were untouchable. He was no longer just a heartbroken husband. He was a strategist, a man on a mission to reclaim his life and deliver a carefully orchestrated retribution. This was the beginning of his calculated revenge, a plan that would unfold with precision and devastating consequences. Mark's first step was to secure his and Emily's future. During his meeting with Ms. Evans, he laid out the situation, presenting the meticulously organized evidence. Ms. Evans listened attentively, her sharp eyes assessing the evidence, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "This is a strong case, Mr. Mark," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "The evidence is substantial and clearly demonstrates infidelity. We can confidently pursue a divorce on those grounds, and given the circumstances, we should be able to secure full custody of Emily for you. Daniel's threats, documented as they are, will also be beneficial to our case." They discussed the financial aspects of the divorce, dividing assets, and calculating spousal support. Mark made it clear that his priority was Emily's well-being, not financial gain. He wanted to ensure that Lisa was treated fairly, but also that she wouldn't be able to use their shared assets to continue her life with Daniel. Ms. Evans assured him that the law was on his side. They drafted a divorce agreement that was both fair and firm, protecting Mark and Emily's interests while ensuring Lisa received what was legally due to her. With the legal groundwork laid, Mark turned his attention to Daniel. He knew that Daniel's arrogance and sense of invincibility stemmed from his position and influence at the art gallery. Mark decided to target that very foundation, to expose Daniel's unethical behavior and dismantle the power he so readily abused. Mark began by drafting an anonymous letter detailing Daniel's affair with Lisa, his abuse of power, and his subsequent threats against Mark. He included copies of the evidence, carefully redacting any information that could identify him as the source. He emphasized the ethical implications of Daniel's actions, highlighting the power imbalance between him and Lisa and the potential damage to the gallery's reputation. The letter was not just a personal attack. It was a carefully constructed narrative designed to expose Daniel's professional misconduct and moral failings, framing him as a liability to the institution he represented. He sent the letter to the board of directors of the art gallery, ensuring it was delivered in a way that guaranteed it would be read and taken seriously. He also sent a copy to the gallery's major donors and sponsors, individuals whose opinions and financial support were crucial to the institution's survival. Mark knew that institutions like the art gallery were highly sensitive to public image and relied heavily on the goodwill of their patrons. Exposing Daniel's behavior would force them to take action, not just out of ethical concerns, but also out of self-preservation. While waiting for the fallout from the letter, Mark focused on building a support network. He reached out to a trusted friend, a journalist named Sarah, known for her integrity and investigative skills. He shared his story with her, providing her with the evidence, on the condition that she would not publish anything without his explicit consent. He didn't want to sensationalize the story. His goal was to ensure that the truth was known and that Daniel was held accountable, not to become the subject of tabloid fodder. Sarah was shocked by the story but also impressed by Mark's meticulous approach and his determination to seek justice. She saw the broader implications of the story, the issue of workplace harassment, abuse of power, and the ethical responsibilities of those in positions of authority. She agreed to help Mark, offering her expertise in navigating the media landscape and advising him on how to best present his case to the public, if and when the time came. Mark also began to subtly spread the word among their mutual friends, carefully choosing individuals he trusted and knew would be discreet. He didn't explicitly reveal the details of the affair but hinted at Lisa's infidelity and the difficult situation he was facing. He knew that gossip, especially in their social circle, traveled fast. He wanted to create a subtle shift in public perception to isolate Lisa socially and to make it difficult for her to maintain the facade of a happy life. He aimed to ensure that she would face the social consequences of her actions, just as he was determined to make Daniel face the professional ones. The effects of Mark's actions were not immediate, but they were steadily building. The atmosphere at the art gallery became tense. Daniel, initially confident that he could weather the storm, began to feel the pressure. Whispers and sidelong glances followed him in the hallways. He received a summons to meet with the board of directors, a meeting he had initially dismissed as a formality but now dreaded. The carefully constructed image he had cultivated, the aura of power and sophistication, began to crumble. Colleagues who had once been eager to curry favor with him now kept their distance. His authority, once absolute, was now questioned and undermined. He found himself increasingly isolated, his calls unanswered, his emails ignored. The board, facing mounting pressure from donors and sponsors, launched an internal investigation, further eroding Daniel's position. The investigation, though discreet, was thorough, and the evidence against Daniel was overwhelming. His attempts to dismiss the allegations as a personal vendetta were met with skepticism and ultimately disbelief. Lisa, too, felt the repercussions of Mark's actions. Friends who had once been close now seemed distant and judgmental. Invitations to social events dwindled. She found herself increasingly isolated, shunned by the very circle she had once considered her own. The life she had envisioned with Daniel, a life of glamour and excitement, was rapidly dissolving into a nightmare of social ostracism and public shame. She tried to reach out to Mark, to apologize, to explain, but he remained distant and unresponsive. He had moved on, focusing his energy on building a new life for himself and Emily. Mark watched these developments unfold with a sense of grim satisfaction. He was not driven by malice or a desire for petty revenge. His actions were calculated, designed to deliver a specific outcome, to protect himself and Emily, to hold Daniel accountable for his actions, and to ensure that Lisa faced the consequences of her choices. He was not interested in forgiveness or reconciliation. He was interested in justice, in restoring balance to a world that had been tilted off its axis by betrayal and deceit. He was methodically dismantling the edifice of lies that Lisa and Daniel had built, brick by painful brick, ensuring they faced the consequences of their actions on both a personal and professional level, leaving them with nothing but the wreckage of their own making. He was demonstrating that actions have consequences, that betrayal carries a price, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, would ultimately be served. This carefully orchestrated plan was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming his power, his dignity, and his future. It was about teaching his daughter, Emily, that integrity and honesty are paramount, and that even in the face of adversity, one must always stand up for what is right. Mark watched these developments unfold with a sense of grim satisfaction. He was not driven by malice or a desire for petty revenge. His actions were calculated, designed to deliver a specific outcome, to protect himself and Emily, to hold Daniel accountable for his actions, and to ensure that Lisa faced the consequences of her choices. He was not interested in forgiveness or reconciliation. He was interested in justice, in restoring balance to a world that had been tilted off its axis by betrayal and deceit. He was methodically dismantling the edifice of lies that Lisa and Daniel had built, brick by painful brick, ensuring they faced the consequences of their actions on both a personal and professional level, leaving them with nothing but the wreckage of their own making. He was demonstrating that actions have consequences, that betrayal carries a price, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, would ultimately be served. This carefully orchestrated plan was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming his power, his dignity, and his future. It was about teaching his daughter, Emily, that integrity and honesty are paramount, and that even in the face of adversity, one must always stand up for what is right. The annual gala for the art gallery was the most important event of the year, a lavish affair attended by wealthy patrons, influential collectors, and prominent figures in the art world. It was a night of celebration, of showcasing the gallery's achievements, and of securing the financial support that ensured its continued success. It was also the perfect stage for Mark's final act. With Sarah's help, Mark secured an invitation to the gala. He had never been particularly fond of these events, finding them superficial and pretentious, but tonight, he had a purpose. He dressed meticulously in a tailored black tuxedo, his demeanor calm and composed, a stark contrast to the turmoil he had experienced in recent months. He looked every bit the successful architect, the respected member of the community, a man in control. The gala was held in the gallery's grand hall, a vast space with soaring ceilings and walls adorned with masterpieces of modern art. The room buzzed with conversation, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the unspoken language of wealth and power. Daniel, as the gallery's director, was at the center of it all, basking in the attention, playing the role of the charming and sophisticated leader. He circulated among the guests, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, his smile confident, his demeanor seemingly untroubled by the recent investigation or the rumors swirling around him. Lisa was also present, clinging to Daniel's side, a strained smile on her face. She was dressed in a gown, a desperate attempt to project an image of elegance and composure, but her eyes darted nervously around the room, and her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked like a shadow of her former self, the vibrant, confident woman replaced by a fragile, anxious figure, haunted by the consequences of her choices. As the evening progressed, Mark observed them from a distance, his gaze cold and detached. He watched as Daniel worked the room, his charm offensive in full swing, trying to maintain the illusion of control. He saw the way people looked at Lisa, a mixture of pity and disdain in their eyes. He felt no satisfaction in their discomfort, only a quiet sense of vindication. The climax of the evening was Daniel's speech, a carefully crafted address that lauded the gallery's achievements, thanked its patrons, and outlined its vision for the future. He stood on a raised platform, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlight, a commanding figure in his element. He spoke eloquently, his voice resonating with authority and passion, painting a picture of success and prosperity. Mark chose this moment to act. As Daniel reached the crescendo of his speech, outlining ambitious plans for a new wing dedicated to emerging artists, Mark made his way to the AV control booth, located discreetly at the back of the hall. He had befriended the technician earlier in the evening, a young man who seemed more interested in his gadgets than the social hierarchy of the art world. With a few words and a generous tip, Mark persuaded him to cooperate. As Daniel concluded his speech, to polite applause, Mark gave the technician the signal. Suddenly, the large screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the gallery's logo, flickered and changed. Instead of the familiar logo, a series of images began to flash across the screen, images that Mark had carefully selected from the evidence provided by Mr. Peterson. The first image was a photograph of Lisa and Daniel, locked in an embrace outside the Rose Garden Hotel. The next was a screenshot of a text message, a particularly explicit exchange between the two lovers. Then came a series of photos, documenting their clandestine meetings, their intimate dinners, their secret getaways. The images were interspersed with excerpts from the anonymous letter, highlighting Daniel's abuse of power and his subsequent threats against Mark. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. A collective gasp swept through the room. The polite applause died in their throats. All eyes were glued to the screen, watching in stunned silence as the carefully constructed facade of Daniel's life crumbled before them. The images were undeniable, the evidence irrefutable. The truth, raw and unfiltered, was laid bare for all to see. Daniel froze, his face drained of color, his eyes wide with horror. He stood on the stage, paralyzed, as his carefully crafted world collapsed around him. Lisa screamed, a high-pitched, keening sound that pierced the silence. She covered her face with her hands, her body shaking uncontrollably. The room erupted in chaos. People started talking, whispering, shouting. Some turned away, unable to watch the spectacle unfolding before them. Others stared, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and morbid fascination. The carefully orchestrated evening, the celebration of art and culture, had descended into a maelstrom of scandal and exposed secrets. Mark stood calmly amidst the chaos, watching as his plan reached its devastating conclusion. He felt no joy, no triumph, only a profound sense of closure. He had delivered justice, not just for himself, but for all those who had been manipulated and abused by Daniels. Several members of the board of directors, their faces grim, quickly surrounded Daniel, ushering him off the stage and into a private room. The damage control had begun, but it was too late. The truth had been exposed, and the consequences were unavoidable. In the ensuing days, the fallout was swift and brutal. Daniel was immediately placed on leave, pending a formal investigation. Within a week, he was fired from his position, his career in the art world effectively over. The scandal made headlines in the local newspapers and art publications, his name forever tarnished. The gallery, reeling from the negative publicity, launched a series of reforms, implementing stricter ethical guidelines and oversight procedures. They were quick to distance themselves from Daniel and reassure donors that such behavior would not be tolerated. Lisa, abandoned by Daniel and ostracized by her social circle, was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. She lost her job at the gallery, her reputation in tatters. The divorce went through as planned, with Mark gaining full custody of Emily. Lisa moved out of their shared home, a broken woman, facing an uncertain future. The social circle she had once navigated with such ease now shunned her, the invitations to parties and events replaced with icy stares and hushed whispers. As for Mark, he emerged from the ordeal stronger and more resilient. He had faced his demons and emerged victorious. He had protected his daughter, reclaimed his dignity, and delivered a powerful message about the importance of integrity and accountability. He focused on rebuilding his life, creating a stable and loving environment for Emily, and dedicating himself to his work. He found solace in his work, in the creative process, and in the unwavering support of his true friends. His business thrived, his reputation as an architect not only intact but enhanced by the way he had handled the crisis with such resolve and dignity. The carefully planned and executed exposure at the gala was not just an act of revenge. It was a public declaration that actions have consequences. It was a demonstration of the power of truth and the importance of holding those in positions of authority accountable. Mark's actions resonated far beyond his personal sphere, sending a message to the art world and beyond that unethical behavior, abuse of power, and betrayal would not be tolerated. It was a masterclass in strategy, a testament to the power of meticulous planning and unwavering determination. This was his ultimate act of retribution, a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice that brought his carefully laid plans to their devastating and ultimately fulfilling conclusion. Mark, having orchestrated the public downfall of Daniel and Lisa, found a sense of closure he hadn't anticipated. The revenge, though meticulously planned and flawlessly executed, left him not with the satisfaction he had imagined, but with a quiet understanding of the complexities of human relationships and the devastating consequences of betrayal. He had achieved his goal. Daniel's career was ruined, Lisa's social standing evaporated, and he had secured his and Emily's future. But the victory felt hollow, a stark contrast to the vibrant life he once envisioned. He focused his energy on rebuilding his life, pouring himself into his work and, most importantly, into being a father to Emily. He moved with Emily to a new house, a fresh start in a quiet neighborhood far from the reminders of his past life. The house, a charming craftsman with a large garden, became their sanctuary. He involved Emily in decorating her room, letting her choose the colors and furniture, creating a space that was truly hers. He spent his evenings and weekends with her, playing in the garden, reading bedtime stories, and simply being present in her life. He was determined to provide her with the stability and love she needed to navigate the aftermath of the divorce and the public scandal that had touched their lives. Emily, though initially confused and hurt by the separation, gradually blossomed in the new environment. She made new friends at school and found joy in simple things, like tending to the small vegetable garden Mark had helped her create. She rarely spoke about Lisa or Daniel, but Mark knew she was processing the events in her own way. He made sure she knew he was always there for her, a constant source of support and understanding, a safe harbor in the storm she had weathered. One day, about a year after the gala, Mark received a call from Sarah, the journalist. "Mark," she said, her voice hesitant, "I need your opinion on something. It's about Lisa." Sarah explained that she had been contacted by Lisa, who wanted to tell her side of the story. Lisa had expressed deep remorse for her actions and wanted to make amends, to the extent that it was possible. She was not seeking to justify her affair, but to explain the circumstances that led to it, the feelings of neglect and isolation she had experienced in the marriage. Mark listened patiently, his initial reaction a mix of anger and resentment. But as Sarah continued, he found himself considering Lisa's request. He had moved on, he had found peace, but perhaps, he thought, Emily deserved to hear her mother's perspective, to understand the complexities of the situation. He agreed to let Sarah interview Lisa, on the condition that the article would focus on the broader issues of marital breakdown and the pressures faced by women in demanding careers, rather than on sensationalizing the details of the affair. He also insisted that Emily would not be involved or identified in any way. The article, published a few weeks later, was a nuanced and thoughtful piece that explored the challenges of maintaining a marriage in the face of career pressures, personal insecurities, and communication breakdowns. It didn't excuse Lisa's actions, but it offered a glimpse into the emotional turmoil that had preceded them. It also highlighted the importance of empathy and understanding, even in the face of betrayal. The article generated a significant response, sparking a wider conversation about marriage, fidelity, and the pressures of modern life. Many readers expressed sympathy for Lisa, recognizing the human frailties that had led to her mistakes. Others condemned her actions, emphasizing the importance of personal responsibility and the sanctity of marriage vows. Mark, reading the article and the ensuing public discussion, felt a sense of detachment. He had moved beyond the need for public validation or condemnation. His focus remained on Emily and on building a new life for himself. A few months later, Mark received a letter from Lisa. It was a handwritten letter, filled with expressions of remorse and regret. She apologized to Mark, not for the affair itself, but for the pain she had caused him and Emily. She acknowledged the hurt she had inflicted and expressed her deep sorrow for the way things had ended. She also wrote about her struggles to rebuild her life, the challenges she faced in finding work and regaining her self-respect. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she expressed a hope that one day they could find a way to coexist peacefully for Emily's sake. Mark read the letter several times, his emotions a complex mix of sadness, empathy, and a lingering sense of betrayal. He didn't reply to the letter, but he didn't discard it either. He placed it in a drawer, a reminder of the past and the lessons he had learned. Life continued. Mark found fulfillment in his work, designing buildings that were both aesthetically pleasing and functional, structures that enhanced the lives of those who used them. He took on projects that challenged him creatively and allowed him to make a positive impact on the community. He found joy in simple pleasures, in gardening, in cooking, in spending time with Emily. He even started dating again, cautiously at first, but eventually finding companionship with a kind and intelligent woman named Anna, a teacher who shared his values and understood the importance of family. One sunny afternoon, about 3 years after the infamous gala, Mark was at the park with Emily, watching her play on the swings. He felt a tap on his shoulder and turned to see Lisa standing there, a tentative smile on her face. She looked different, older, more subdued. But there was also a newfound strength in her eyes, a quiet resilience forged in the crucible of her experiences. "Mark," she said softly, "can we talk?" They sat on a nearby bench, watching Emily play, a comfortable silence between them. It was the first time they had spoken face to face since the divorce, and the first time they had been in each other's presence without anger or resentment. "I wanted to see Emily," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve it, but I miss her so much." Mark nodded, understanding her pain. He had made his peace with the past, and he knew that it was important for Emily to have a relationship with her mother, if that was what she wanted. "She's a good kid, Lisa," he said. "She's strong, resilient." They talked for a while, about Emily, about their lives, about the future. Lisa told him she was working as a freelance art consultant, a far cry from her former position, but she was finding satisfaction in it. She was also volunteering at a local community center, teaching art to underprivileged children. "I'm trying to make amends," she said, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "To give back something positive." Mark listened, offering no judgment, only a quiet understanding. He saw in her a woman transformed by adversity, a woman who had made mistakes but was striving to learn from them and build a better life for herself. As the sun began to set, Lisa stood up to leave. "Thank you, Mark," she said, "for letting me see her." Mark nodded. "She's your daughter, Lisa. You have a right to be in her life." Lisa smiled, a genuine smile this time, and walked towards Emily, who ran to greet her with a hug. Mark watched them, a sense of peace settling over him. He had come a long way from the heartbroken husband seeking revenge. He had found healing, not in retribution, but in forgiveness, in letting go of the past and embracing the future. He had learned that true strength lies not in destroying one's enemies, but in rising above the pain they have caused and building a life filled with purpose, meaning, and love. He had found his own form of redemption, not in the ashes of revenge, but in the quiet strength of forgiveness and the enduring power of hope. And as he walked towards his daughter and her mother, he knew that his journey, though marked by pain and betrayal, had ultimately led him to a place of peace and a future filled with possibilities. The scars remained, a reminder of the battles he had fought, but they no longer defined him. They were simply a part of his story, a testament to his resilience, and a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and healing are always possible. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.